Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined by two guests tonight. We were hoping for three and we are still hoping to get our third one to join us, but we've had a wee technical issue. So we are working on that. We hopefully will get him a wee bit later in the show. But here in the studio, I have Ronnie Cowan MP, the MP for Inverclyde and the organiser of the first ever Westminster debate on UBI. How are you, Ronnie?
I'm very well, thank you, Kenny.
And joining us on Skype, we have Cleo Goodman, who is a director of the Citizens Basic Income Network Scotland. And Cleo, how are you doing tonight?
Fantastic, thank you.
Excellent. Well, we are obviously going to be talking all about UBI tonight. That's what the whole focus of the show is. But we start, as we always do, with just a quick roundup of the news for today. So as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there had been a total of 133,894 coronavirus tests concluded. Of these, 118,185 tests were confirmed positive and 15,709 were negative. 15,709 were positive. 590 people were in hospital last night with suspected or confirmed COVID-19, 15 of whom were in intensive care and another 8 of whom were with suspected COVID-19 in intensive care. And that marks an increase of 27 confirmed new cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications related to the coronavirus infection has sadly risen to 2,442. This number only includes those who died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures available show that 41,481 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 202. And that number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford have written to the Prime Minister to request an extended Brexit transition period to complete negotiations and support businesses through recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. The joint letter reiterates that an extension is essential to avoid needless damage to Scotland's economy at a time when COVID-19 is hitting businesses when they're most vulnerable. The transition period is scheduled to finish on the 31st of December this year, but can be extended by mutual agreement provided a decision is taken by the 1st of July. The SNP has demanded that the Home Office ditch its hostile environment following the Equality and Human Rights Commission's announcement that it will investigate the policies that led up to the Windrush scandal. The party has tabled amendments to the immigration bill going through Parliament, which are designed to roll back on the hostile environment and are likely to be debated next week. If the immigration bill is passed unamended, EEA nationals will face a significantly increased risk of falling victim to the same hostile environment, with their free movement rights stripped away. Responding to ONS statistics published today that showed that the UK's economy suffered its biggest monthly slump in GDP on record of 20.4% in April due to the coronavirus pandemic, SNP Shadow Chancellor Alison Thewlis MP has said that the Treasury must continue to support businesses and livelihoods to prevent what is already thought to be the worst economic hit taken by any developed country from becoming any worse. She particularly called for the job retention scheme to be extended for as long as it is needed, not wound up arbitrarily. The SNP has warned that Scotland's vital tourism sector is on the brink unless the Treasury urgently takes steps to strengthen support and bring forward a tailored financial relief package. In a letter to Chancellor Rishi Sunak, SNP MP Drew Hendry ramped up calls for sectoral support, similar to steps taken by EU countries, that would stimulate growth, safeguard thousands of jobs and secure the industry's long-term future as the impact of the coronavirus pandemic is felt. A multi-million-pound fund has been set up to help the energy sector recover from the dual economic impacts of coronavirus and the oil and gas price crash. The £62 million Energy Transition Fund will support businesses, especially in the North East, in the oil, gas and energy sectors over the next 5 years as they grow and diversify, and will help attract private sector investment in the region. The Scottish Government has agreed a funding package for the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society, the charity that underpins the world-famous Fringe Festival. As part of a commitment to support cultural, social and economic recovery, the Fringe Society will receive a £1 million interest-free loan from the Scottish Government. It will also benefit from a £149,000 Pivotal Enterprise Resilience Fund grant and a £100,000 grant from City of Edinburgh Council. And finally today, following the publication yesterday of the feasibility study into universal basic income in Scotland, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and Economy Secretary Fiona Hislop today voiced support for the idea at the daily coronavirus briefing. The First Minister said that the pandemic had led her from being interested to supportive of the idea. The Economy Secretary stressed that without cooperation from the Westminster Government, though, it would be impossible for the Scottish Government to implement the idea. And of course, that final story, that was in response to a question from Broadcasting Scotland, because we knew that tonight we were having this special show. So we're going to start with some basics on just why UBI is important. So come to you first, Ronnie. Why is it that you think UBI is such an important component of a good society?
The concept behind UBI starts with the fact that we create poverty. Poverty is a man-made concept. We decide how wealth is created and how it's retained. UBI says, or basic income says, everybody gets a share of that. Every single person gets some cut of that, and it gives them a platform on which they can have a security within their own life, which they can then build on and go forward on. And if somewhere along that life something goes wrong, then it becomes a safety net to catch them and make sure it's basic. It makes sure you can put food on the table and a roof over your head. And everybody living with that security around them, there's an opportunity to live the life they want to live.
Mm-hmm. And Cleo, for you, what is it that attracted you to kind of dedicate so much of your time to working on basic income?
I think very similarly to what Ronnie was just saying, it was the idea that we can just solve these problems. You know, I'd spent my entire life being like, this is horrendous, like we should not leave people with nothing. It's unacceptable that people are homeless or people are living in destitution. And when I heard of the idea of a basic income, that we literally just solve that by giving people the means to cover their basic needs regardless of anything else, I thought that was a really exciting concept. Other than that fundamental addressing people's basic needs, I think the other side of it that I find so interesting is around work and around choice. I think we acknowledge work only through how much we can be paid to do it, and rather than its value. There are, hundreds of thousands of people who spend their time caring, which is invaluable and essential work, and that's not recognised financially. Things like activism, you're not paid to do activism, and I think a basic income allows us to completely redefine the way that we see work.
Mm-hmm. And Ronnie, the SNP obviously during the coronavirus crisis especially has been talking a lot about the failures of universal credit, particularly things like the 5-week wait and the loans that people get to bridge that gap. Now UBI would help to kind of avoid that whole problem, wouldn't it?
Well, UBI, the important thing is we're at the stage now of the UBI that we're working towards getting it right. A lot of the problems we have with the current welfare system is because we rushed at it. We had an idea of what we wanted to do, we're phasing out older systems, and we came in with this new universal credit. And since then we've been patching it and patching it and patching it, changing the rules, chopping and changing, and people still not claiming what they should be getting. Huge amount of the people in that situation, and also people who are falling through the cracks and not getting what they deserve because they simply can't work their way through the system. Basic income has to be a very basic system which everybody understands, and if you pay everybody a monthly or a weekly amount, it's as simple as that. One of the beauties of this system is it's a very simple system, which means the administration runs of costing it are very small as well. And in the pilots we'll look at later on, part of the savings is in the existing systems will be poured into actually funding, getting money into the hands of people who need it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Cleo, this is one thing that actually brings the left and the right together on this issue, isn't it? The idea that it actually shrinks the amount that government interferes with people's lives.
Yeah, it should be. I think it's at its core an investment in people. It's an exercise in trust, really. Like, I think if you give people the means to live off of, you can see them thrive. But you do have to have a certain level of trust. And I think actually that's what's been missing from existing systems, and why they become so complicated and convoluted and then broken is because we don't have that fundamental trust in people, which I think is essential and wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen, obviously, in this crisis, we've seen a lot of people who've suddenly had their incomes collapse, particularly people who are self-employed in small businesses that have had to shut down, suddenly left without an income. And there have been a whole lot of people who have kind of fallen through the cracks of the various things like the job retention scheme and whatnot. How would UBI kind of change that whole whole framework?
Well, if we had a basic income in place before COVID, then yes, people would be in a situation where their incomes would drop dramatically, but they would know that they're not going to starve. The mental health of people would be improved enormously. So that's when it becomes a safety net to people. If we don't have it, it's a great unknown. People who've never been in universal credit in their life suddenly find themselves in that situation. There's also a stigma about that. Basic income takes away the stigma for anybody receiving the money because everybody receives that money. So I know my casework almost doubled in the process of a week when people were losing their job and the fear and the unknown of people who've never been in that situation. Whereas if they'd known, well, this is bad, we know it's going to be bad, it's a worldwide epidemic, but my mortgage is still going to be paid. I can keep the lights on in the house, I can put food on the table. It takes that pressure off of people. It is basic. Basic income is never going to make anybody rich. What it is it's a security net, a safety net to keep people comforted at the worst times in their life, and also when they're earlier years, when they're setting off, because it gives them choices. Do I want to go to university? Do I want to study part-time? Do I want to work and make lots and lots of money? Fine, if that's what I want to do, that's what you want to do. But if you want to examine, maybe I want to do something in the arts, there's a basic income. You can go and you can try these things out, and discover what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Now, one of my favourite explanations of UBI is the Monsters Inc. argument, which I've been tweeting out all day. It's made by Scott Santens, who's the guest who's missing just now. This idea that it does just, as you say, free people. It gives people the option to pursue different goals. Cleo, how big a difference do you think that would make? The idea that people would be able to perhaps pursue art or music or these other career paths that don't necessarily have an immediate income, but have maybe where there might be a delay before you can ever start making money from it. Do you think that there would be a kind of cultural impact from this?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's that the concept of secure risk, I think, is really, really important. It's how people fulfill their potential. You need to be able to take risks because that's where you really reach your goals. That's where you get out of your comfort zone. That stuff's really important. But you need to be secure in doing that. And for so many people, that's just not the case. Like, not many people have the security to take on a business or, a career in the arts or, starting a charity, all of that kind of essential stuff that really is where beauty comes into our lives, where life finds its meaning. The security to do that doesn't exist for so many people. And actually, I think artists are a fantastic example of basic incomes already working, or something that's analogous to a basic income, because for most artists, their income comes from grants, from money being given to them for them to explore their trade and their art. And that allows them to find the stuff that they want to be putting into the world. I think at the moment, most of the beautiful art important art that's being created is coming from artists who are given financial support to explore that creativity with security.
Yeah. I mean, we had, back in the old days, we had patrons, wealthy people who would just give money to artists because that was a way of kind of showing their wealth. But it's something that the state could invest in just as equally, couldn't they?
And it was also a situation that the wealthy could afford to do that. A lot of very wealthy people would take a year off and travel around Europe and do that sort of thing. That opportunity was taken away from the people who basically had to go out and work to survive.
Yeah. There's another couple of questions. Just now we're hearing an awful lot about racial justice in the wake of the George Floyd killing. The Black Lives Matter movement has become this really kind of top of the agenda issue. How do you think UBI plays into that kind of question, this question of racial justice?
I think if you look at the racial justice aspect of it, it's about poverty. The majority of people, the black people who are being marginalised in America, are coming from very, very poor backgrounds. If you eradicate poverty, then you cannot stigmatise people for being poor, and that takes away the stigma that's been forced upon them. It's a step up in society, and it's a great leveler within society as well.
And Cleo, the same question to you, but also I know there's a feminist argument for UBI. What do you think of that kind of argument?
Yeah, so on the first point, I think there's two sides to, and actually I guess it's relevant to both. I think there's two sides to those things. Inequality is economic, like it's cemented by economics. if you don't have access to the same economic opportunity as other people, then that gap is always going to be maintained. And that's relevant, to the feminist argument, to the racial inequality. You need to have something that starts to address that. And a basic income doesn't do that in isolation on its own. I think it goes some way to do that. That really is dependent on how it's funded, on which basic income we implement. I would advocate for one that does address those things and that is funded progressively to start addressing those inequalities. But the other side of it, I think, is, for me, a really crucial part of a basic income is that it gives people enough money to live off of so they can choose what they do with their time. At the moment, people that are fighting these fights for equality, whether that's racial or for women, they have to do that on very low wages or in their spare time. And I know this from personal experience. I'm from working in the third sector. It's hard work paying your bills and having a job that is completely ethical. So I think a basic income is a massive opportunity to put our money where our mouth is and allow people to fight for what needs to be fought for. And, this is really relevant to the environment as well. This is something that we need to solve very quickly. We need to change our behavior. We need to change what we're spending our time working on to make the changes that we need to protect the environment. And only something as comprehensive as a basic income can allow us to do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we sometimes hear people say, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all problems, but there are some UBI advocates who kind of consider it this key foundation stone to the whole changing of an economy. How big a difference do you think it can make in terms of just our attitudes to work and our attitudes to how the economy is operated now? Cleo, sorry.
That's okay. I think that really depends on how you do it. Like, again, a basic income is a tool. It has 5 characteristics. It's simple, it's cash, it's paid regularly, it's paid to the individual without conditions and to everyone. But you can actually do it in almost infinite different ways. So it really depends on the decisions that we make when we're implementing a basic income. You have to design it for certain outcomes. So if you want these positive outcomes, or if you want these specific outcomes, we have to think about that all the way on our journey to actually getting there. And I think it could make a massive difference to the way that we view work. To do that in the most significant way possible, it would need to be enough to actually live off of. I think a big question around this is housing. A basic income that covers rent would be enormous at this point, because housing policy is really quite broken. So we need to address that alongside a basic income. A basic income can't solve problems in housing policy. We have to do that separately. So again, we need to address things across the board for it to fully reach its potential as a basic income. But it's not a silver bullet. It works in relation to many other things, and we need to be clear on that. Mm-hmm. and work consciously towards the outcomes that we want to see. Yeah.
Now, sorry, just before we go on, if you may have noticed just popping up on the screen there, our Twitter bar. If you want to join the conversation, then please do join us. You can follow us on Twitter @BroadcastScot and join the conversation using the hashtag Scotland@7. That's Scotland AT and the number 7. We'd love to hear what you've got to say, and we will be bringing some of those tweets up on the screen throughout the show. Looking at the history of this idea, just very quickly, Ronnie, this goes back as far as Thomas Paine argued for this idea in agrarian justice of people.
I'd take it back about 500 years before that.
Oh, well.
Yes.
Well, you're the expert. Go ahead.
No. The Chart of the Forest, Guy Stanley wrote very eloquently about the Chart of the Forest, which is a follow-up document to the Magna Carta. Magna Carta gave wealth to barons and people who then paid taxes to the king, and that's how he stabilised his old kingdom. Mm-hmm. The Chart of the Forest said to the common man, that's common ground, that's the common ground that you can go and graze your sheep on. Mm-hmm. That forest is common ground. You can go and you can take wood from that to build fires on. Mm-hmm. It belongs to everybody. It's a common wealth in your community, and you should all have the same access to that. So that was 1217. Mm-hmm. And then you're quite right in saying the rights of man, Thomas Paine, and so it's progressed rapidly to the 1960s, and Richard Nixon trying to get it established in America, very close to doing that in America. So it's an idea, as you say, been right the way through history. people have dipped in and dipped out. And we've been talking about, I've already been really heavily involved in this since I got elected 5 years ago now. It was a concept I knew about, but when I got elected, it was something I wanted to try and drive forward and see what we could do with it. And I think we've come a long way in that, not because of me, but I think we've come a long way in that 5 years. And I spoke at a conference in Lisbon 2 or 3 years ago now. The number of countries that were represented me was quite an eye-opener to me. I thought maybe it's a localised thing for Western Europe and the States that were interested, but from Japan and right around the globe, and for lots of states and countries in Africa are looking very seriously at this because it is about eradicating poverty.
Yeah.
So we've got to that stage now. What changes it in the psyche of people? Things change within the world, and people just think maybe now's the time for change, and that's why in Scotland has been accelerated because of COVID-19. Lots of people, you said earlier on, have fallen into a situation, so it raises their consciousness of just how precarious their lifestyle actually is, how far are any of us away from losing their houses. Is it 3 salaries, is it 2 salaries, So I think that's raised the consciousness of people. And this idea that we can change, we can make this thing change, and this idea's been for a long, long time. There's been pilots we can look at and say, well, that didn't work particularly well. What could we do to change it? The most recent one was in Finland, which ran for 2 years. And now what we're looking at, these 4 pilots potentially in Scotland, are absolutely, I read the document last night. It was like getting the Bruins on Christmas Day for me. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a terrific piece of work, and it really goes into the nitty-gritty of it. I wrote an article for the RSA 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and I said there's 2 fundamental things that the basic income community has to look at. What's the basic income is set at, and how much is going to cost to fund the whole thing? And this document which has been produced does that. It gives us options for that. Not Annie Miller, we mentioned earlier. Annie's been doing this for years in her book, The Basic Income Handbook. Goes through all those different scenarios. But this project we're looking at here in Scotland, if it gets put into place, will address those fundamental issues. What do you get? How much does it cost the state to fund it?
And Cleo, what's your feeling? You've been involved in this for a few years as well. You've been working on this pretty hard. What's your feeling about why suddenly now in the last really few months this has gone from a fringe idea to something that's being talked about regularly and is a serious policy proposal that's almost within touching distance?
Yeah, you'd hope so. I think it's the size of the idea and how exciting it is to think and talk about has led to the massive increase in people thinking and talking about it over the last few years. I think the reason that it's massively spiked over since the coronavirus crisis is just because it feels so much more like the solution to the problems that have been exacerbated by the crisis. So I think people are really seeing. But even when previously they weren't quite convinced on like the universal nature of a basic income, why should it go to everyone? This crisis has shown that there are things that can impact everyone and that can the universal problems. So we also need to have universal solutions. We need to invest in universal things to make sure that we do have a safety net that Ronnie's mentioned several times, that no one can fall through. I think so many people who have never come into contact with Social Security before have had to come into contact with it during this crisis, and they felt how inadequate it is, how belittling it is. And I think they're realising from personal experience that this is not something that anyone deserves to have to interact with. And they're realising more clearly than through looking at newspaper headlines about how people that claim universal credit have their mental health affected by that process. How people with disabilities, how carers are mistreated by the system that's supposed to care for them. They're feeling that themselves personally. So I think they are less accepting of that being the kind of infrastructure that we have in place, and more excited about concepts like basic income that replace that with something more humane and more empowering, more universal. So I think that's partly why it spikes so dramatically through this.
Yeah, and Cleo, you mentioned the damage that can be done to people's mental health by going through the current social security system. I can speak to that myself. But what do you think are some of the other benefits of UBI? We know that from trials that it does improve people's mental health. What other benefits are there, do you think, for individuals who are receiving a UBI?
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. I think everyone would have. I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of people, if not thousands, over the last couple of years about basic income, and I asked them that exact question: what would a basic income mean to you? And you get a genuinely unique answer from everyone, because everyone is unique. Most people say things like, it would allow me to spend more time with my family. It would allow me to do that thing that I've always wanted to do, or sometimes buy that thing that I've always wanted to buy, often travel. But it really does make people think differently about their choices and about their lives because of that shift in security. I think the idea that you have to work, you have to show up, you have to earn a living, it boxes us into a certain way of living our lives. And for many people, a basic income would allow them to change that, allow them to take those risks again. So I really do think it's difficult to know. And I think it is difficult to know, particularly because there have never been as comprehensive a basic income trial as is required to see these even short-term effects of how people behave differently. But because we've never really had a full basic income implemented permanently, we don't actually know what the long-term impacts of a basic income would be. And that's something that's quite deeply covered in this feasibility study report. Is a pilot is only able to show you what a basic income can do in a couple of years for a sample group. An experiment is very different from a full basic income, which is a universal policy without conditions. Mm-hmm. A pilot only goes to some people. That's not universal, and it's got many conditions because it's an experiment. So what we really need now, with this amount of interest in basic income, is a basic income. And I think Scotland has a great opportunity to do that. We'll see if we can, but the barriers are there. But my point there is we don't know what a basic income could do, but it's very exciting to imagine. Yeah.
And Ronnie, as Cleo said, there have been lots of trials going back, as you said, to the US in the 60s and 70s, the Canadian trial, the Mincome trial. There's ongoing trials in Africa now. There was this recent trial in Finland. What kind of things have you learned from looking at those kind of trials?
They all throw up different things. A basic income in Namibia is going to do a different thing for somebody's a basic income in Fife. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. In Namibia, we've found it's empowered women who didn't have an income before. It's improved, everywhere we go, it improves mental health. We've touched on this already. Mm-hmm. But it gives people choices as well. We found that some people were actually becoming almost quite entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. They're having money, and they're getting together in small groups and saying, well, I can save that, if you can save that. We put that in together, and they're starting their small cooperatives. And people are realising that there's this guaranteed income. They knew it was going to come every single month. They can start planning further down the road. And it was less of a hand-to-mouth existence. Mm-hmm. They could say, well, if we all do this in 6 months' time, if 5 of us put that aside, we're going to have that pot of money. And that pot of money buys us this. And we can do it. So they started becoming more business-oriented. And what they did, hey, maybe it'll sprouts capitalists all over the place. I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there were some downsides to it. But there are different things you have here in Scotland, I think, because in Scotland, what I think you'll find, yes, mental health, opportunities for people at different stages in their life. So it varies with where you run them, which is why this pilot that we're looking at here in Scotland is so important, and the scale of it is bigger than I've seen in many other countries. It will run for 3 years rather than 2, and then at the back of that, you're going to have a couple of years to analyse all the data and see what it actually did to people. And it's very skillfully, hopefully this will be built properly, so we're not treating people like lab rats. They're taken in, they're part of this project, and at some point they're going to have to hand it back over to the existing systems and get back on life as are this now. So we have to be careful with that as well. So how you run them is crucially important. Remembering that what we're doing is this is people's lives. And we're almost experimenting with people's lives. Mm-hmm. But the outcomes that we've had from the previous ones, or the good outcomes, hopefully can be represented if we plan and design these basic income projects correctly, knowing what outcomes we want to achieve from them. Mm-hmm. And that's very well detailed in this report.
Yeah. And when you look at the kind of political groundswell that's developing, as the First Minister said, she's gone from kind of quite interested in the idea to being supportive of it. Yeah. The Greens have been supportive of it for a long time. The Lib Dems have made some very positive noises, and Labour are mixed on it, but there are a good number of Labour politicians who are very positive. What's your view of the political position of the policy now?
At Westminster, I've put forward for a backbench business debate, and to achieve that, to be granted that debate, they like to get cross-party support. I've got 7 different parties at Westminster who all want to take part in this debate. But they all want to talk in favour of it, which isn't a great debate.
Yeah.
So we're actually trying to find people who want to talk against it. The only Conservative we mentioned it was Edward Lee, and he's for it.
Yeah.
So I'm saying to him, can you not get some of your pals that want to actually take on this debate, and we'll take on this debate, because they're there. There's lots of Tories who don't like this as an idea. So we're going to get them to step forward and debate against us. And the Labour Party seems to be very split in this. McDonnell liked it, Shadow Chancellor.
Yeah.
He liked the idea, but Keir Starmer doesn't. So we know there's voices within the parties that like this idea. What we've got to do is get it out onto the floor and start talking about the practicalities of it and educating people about it, because there's lots of misconceptions. I took part in a thing with the Adam Smith Institute just last week, and one of the guys there was saying it makes people indolent. You give them the thing, why would they go and work? I said, well, if they give it to you, would you go and work? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So why is there other people out there you think should make them sit at home and drink beer and do whatever they're going to do? Some of them will. If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But the vast majority of people would see this as a basis which they can confidently go forward and do different things. But politically, it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're in a situation in any government, if you've got a majority, you can make anything you want to happen.
Yeah.
If it was the other side of the fence and the Conservatives were saying, this is a great idea, it would be powered right through.
Yeah.
What we've got to do is get ourselves in a situation where we get a majority of 650 MPs at Westminster to push it forward to the next stage. And that's what we're working for.
I was going to ask you about some of these, some of the issues where people object to UBI. I mean, this idea that people would be lazy, that it would pay people to do nothing. I mean, it often comes from people who themselves, as you say to them, well, you have a passive income, you own shares or whatever, and that gives you a regular income that you don't work for, but you still go out and work. So there is that kind of judgmental nature of things. There's also obviously the question of cost, and clearly it would be an expensive policy. But what's your response to that when people say it's going to cost so much, it's going to bankrupt the country?
Well, it's costed. There's 2 levels looking at this pilot, and it's very well costed in this pilot. But the fact being, if you were to do this UK-wide, it could cost you £230 billion to run it a year. The current welfare system costs £250, £260. Yeah? And a lot of that would be encompassed with what we're paying into basic income. Plus, basic income is going to save you money on health services, on the criminal justice system, and on the existing welfare system. So there's a net payment we've got to calculate there. The figures for Scotland are running at for the pilots are £186 million over 3 years net, which is a lot of money. But to me, my view of a basic income and the broader concept is, you think it's an expensive thing to have. I think the cost to society of not having it is far greater.
Yeah, Scott Santens makes the point of this, what he calls the lost Einstein problem, where how much does it cost society if some child doesn't become the next Einstein because he happened to choose poor parents?
Yeah, well, I can use my Harper Lee story if you want.
Feel free, yeah.
We all know Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, but she was working as a clerk, I think, in an accountant's office, and she was babysitting for a couple at the same time to make ends meet. She was never going to finish that book. It was just never ever going to happen. And the couple she worked for on Christmas Day gave her a year's salary and said, that's on the condition that you don't work for a year and you finish that book. And she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah. How many more Harper Lees are sitting out there waiting to write classics? You know? Yeah, that's a fascinating story. I do like that one. There are other objections. Some trade unions have argued that it would actually entrench the idea of low-paid work, that it would become just a wage subsidy, and would the way that, say, tax credits have become in some ways. What do you make of that? Well, I see what they're saying, but at the same time, to me, it gives people choices. You're offering me a 0 hours contract, and right now I've got nothing. I'm going to take it. You know, you're lowering me, give me something the basic minimum wage. If I'm sitting there on a basic income, I can come to you and say, well, I'm not going to do a 0 hours contract, but I'll do 10 hours for you, I'll do 20 hours for you. I think it could actually flip it all the way around and empower the working class.
Yeah, the idea that it would be a kind of strike fund that you couldn't get rid of. Cleo, we lost Cleo there for a moment. We are having a string of technical issues tonight, unfortunately. So Cleo, how you are back with us now. I don't know how much of the conversation you missed there, but what are some of the big objections that you've heard when you talk to people about UBI?
Generally, they're ethical, and it does often come back to this idea that people won't work if they get a basic income, which, when we talk about what we've learned from pilots, that is one of the most robust pieces of evidence when you're looking at, when you're trying to make a judgment on basic income. You have to look at the whole body of evidence from all the different pilots and all different situations. And it's very, very rare that there is a significant drop-off in people engaging in paid work. So that's nice that we have some quite robust evidence there to dismiss that. But I do understand why people have that belief, because we've all lived all our lives with the belief that work is really important and very, very core to our self-worth and the contribution we're making to society. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of important work is unpaid. We talk again about caring, whether that's parenting or being an unpaid carer for someone with a disability. The cost, it's the classic ones. And actually, I think when you talk in a lot of detail about why that bothers people, like why does the cost really bother you, you often come back around to kind of agreeing again. Like if you really dig into basic income and designing it in a way that eliminates poverty, it's quite hard to disagree with that. I think the arguments that I really empathise with, and actually I completely agree with, are about it. A basic income could be a threat to people who have a higher cost of living, for example. So people with disabilities, it costs more to meet their basic needs because the world isn't built to meet people with disabilities needs, unfortunately, not yet anyway. And a basic income, if it's designed poorly, it could exacerbate that. If you don't retain things like disability benefit on top of a basic income, then people could be losing out. So I think that's a very valid concern, and that's actually something that's really crucial that we as people that support a basic income make sure we build into our conversations about basic income. We must protect everyone. A basic income goes to everyone. It must work for everyone. We must listen to people and their actual needs, particularly people who spend a lot of their life and their time interacting with Social Security. We need to make sure that a basic income doesn't fall into the same pitfalls as the existing system. So yeah, I think it's really important to be conscious that a basic income is something that we design. It's a concept, it's an idea, it's something great to get behind, but we need to build it correctly.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think are the really big obstacles that need to be overcome? Maybe the technical obstacles and maybe the some of the political hurdles that need to be bypassed?
I mean, politics is the main one. We are getting flat nose from UK government at the moment on anything basic income related, but because it's this big idea, I think it's an opportunity to really unify people. Like you said earlier, it's not actually about politics. It's about a direction. It's about making choices for ourselves and for each other that actually lift us up and move us forward as a society. And I think we should all unite behind things like eliminating poverty. And a basic income is a very clear, very simple idea that we can get behind. So while there are massive political barriers at the moment, I don't think that's going to dull. I don't think that's going to extinguish this conversation because it's such an interesting one to have. And I don't think anyone's got their hands over their eyes about how long it's going to take to get there or how significant a step it is or how significant an investment it is. But it's one that's worth making. We need to make sure that we have a significant swell of public support for this idea if we want to make it happen. And I think we're seeing that growing week on week at this point.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at the how you might design a UBI, there are lots of different ways. I mean, we talked a wee bit about the likes of Thomas Paine. He was all about a land value tax as a way of compensating people for that loss of the common weal. What's your feeling about the best ways to to fund something like this?
It's good. A lot of it is good to be taken out of the existing social security, the welfare system. So there's got a pot of money there already. What we're going to, the pilots are looking at, if I can just read this, retaining the disability, the housing, the childcare, and limited capability for work. So that's going to have to be put on top of it so people don't fall through the cracks. But everything else beyond that gets taken away. So you've got a pot of money to start with. Yes, people who earn more are going to have to pay more tax to pay for it. But they're getting a basic income as well.
Yeah.
So if they're getting a basic income of 10 grand a year and they're paying extra 10 grand in tax, they're no worse off.
Yeah.
Some people will be worse off, but the people at the very top of our structure right now, the people who don't understand they're already getting a basic income because they've so much inherited wealth anyway.
Yeah. And Cleo, what about you? Do you lean towards kind of wealth taxes, land value tax, any of those kind of ideas, or do you think income tax is enough to make this work?
Yeah, I don't think a fully income tax funded basic income is doesn't cut it for me. I like the ideas of more exciting types of funding. Definitely land value tax. Land shouldn't be commodified, and if it is commodified, we should all benefit from that. Wealth tax, absolutely. Like wealth doesn't flow through the economy unless you disrupt it a little bit. So I think people that have significant amounts of wealth, that should be put into a basic income so everyone can benefit from that, but also so the wealthy can benefit from that. I think if we thrive as a society, everyone benefits. Another one that I think is really crucial is data. There's a lot of money to be made out of data. We all collectively produce data, so therefore we should all benefit from the profits made from data. And actually that's going to become more significant as we get more data driven as an economy, because it's just going to grow. So we need to address that now to stop that just going to a very small selection of people and to make it something that we all benefit from. And I like the idea, for example, the closest thing to a basic income is the Alaska Permanent Fund, which is funded by profits from oil there, which we should move away from oil, obviously, for obvious reasons. But something like that, like a fund that the more a society or, whether it's the nation or a community prospers, the more you divide that up and everyone on an individual basis prospers.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are other political hurdles beyond just getting other politicians on side, Ronnie. Some of the structures of the constitutional structures of the UK make this very difficult. This was something Fiona Hislop mentioned at the press conference. Without support from the UK government, the DWP and HMRC, it's going to be very, very difficult for the Scottish government to make this happen. How easy do you think it's going to be to get that support?
It wouldn't be easy. That's the big two. DWP and HMRC have got to get on board, and the powers have to come to Scotland so as we can treat the people within those pilots properly, while they're in the pilot and then when they're handed back. We keep on saying we're taking a four nations approach to COVID-19, and then we hear in the background actually not everyone's getting involved at the level it should be, not getting briefed properly. The same thing happened during Brexit. The Scottish Government wasn't called to the top table often enough to make their voices heard. The UK Government's got to get over that. It has got that hurdle of trusting people. What we're trying to do here, if they take it if they wanted to look in Scotland as just been part of the UK, as they like to do, in these areas in Scotland, we want to run pilot projects to eradicate poverty. How could they possibly object to that? If we run those pilots and they don't work, we will learn from the fact that they didn't work. We'll learn from what we did wrong. Is it a complete non-starter? Have we missed something here? And if they work, we're eradicating poverty. So why would they not want to do that in the rest of the United Kingdom? Why would they not have a model which can say to the globe, we are world leaders? We keep hearing this all the time, we're world leaders. We'll be a world leader. Show a bit of ambition, show a bit of goal here, and say, we're going to go ahead and head this. And if it goes wrong in Scotland. You kind of think that actually might appeal to them. So just give us those powers that are required. But it's going to be a hard ask because they're so entrenched with keeping the powers at Westminster. And we saw it during Brexit. Powers which should have flowed through the Scottish Government get held back and held back. So it's a tough ask. But if the UK government genuinely believes they want to take a four nations approach to things, it's a perfect example of how they can do it on a temporary basis over a period of 3 years on a pilot project. What are they so scared of that they wouldn't allow us to do that? What are we going to prove to them that they don't want proven to them?
And you mentioned to us the last time you were on the show that you did know of some Tory MPs who were supportive of the idea. We won't force you to name names, but what do you think? Are you getting any kind of support from them? Are they trying to apply any leverage to the front benches?
You know, the Tory party is a strange beast. You know, it's very good at ripping itself up and reinventing itself, but it does it very quickly, so we can't sort of get involved in it. I don't think Boris Johnson will last as Prime Minister. I think he's going to carry the can over COVID-19. At some point, they'll try and replace him. My guess would be Michael Gove replaces him. So the whole shape of the cabinet, who's involved, will change. At some point, it will change anyway. Mm-hmm. Maybe not as quickly as I'd like it to, but it will change anyway. It's all about these key players in those key positions. We've got a government, we've got a cabinet. Within the cabinet, you've got 4 or 5 people who are actually very, very powerful. And as we know, we've got special advisors that are very, very powerful as well. Mm. It's those people. If those people change their mind, things can happen very, very quickly. Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you're an independence supporter. Do you think this might be something that we end up having to wait until independence to make it happen?
Well, let's look at the timescale here. It takes at least a year to get this up and running. And then we're looking at a 3-year pilot, and then we're looking at 2 years maybe of looking at the data, and that's my guesstimate here, to look at the data to decide what the benefits were, where it worked best, and what changes we have to make. So we're 6 years down the road. Mm-hmm. Do I think that's good timescale for independent Scotland? Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Why not make that one of the key fundamental pillars of an independent Scotland, and back of a lot of good stuff that Cowan released today, I think it was.
Yeah. And Cleo, what are some of the big obstacles that you see, and what thoughts do you have on how to get past them?
I think it's a case of public education. I think the more people that are armed with the idea of a basic income, the better. There's a pledge going around in support of a Scottish basic income, which is a good starting point for anyone that wants to see a Scottish basic income. But learn more about it, make sure you know exactly what it is and exactly how you want it to be designed and what outcomes you want it to be working towards, and make that heard. Write to your councillors, write to your MPs, write to your MSPs, and just make sure that politicians can't look away from this, that this is something that they're working, collectively, collaboratively and strategically to push for, because like Ronnie says, the political barriers are not small. But they're not insurmountable either. Like we can challenge them and we can push for them, because fundamentally it's about what we as a society want to see implemented. And if everyone feels a basic income would be right for themselves, for their communities, for their families, then it's something that we can push for. But we do need to work. Essentially, we need to work together to do it, and it is going to be work. It is going to be probably a fairly long journey to do that. But it's not something that is going to go away, and I think it's now's the time to really be pushing for it. And it's something that we can do on a smaller scale as well. Like big pilots like this, I've absolutely hoped to see a Scottish pilot. I think this is a fantastic approach to the long-term implementation of a basic income. But we can do smaller scale things. There have been some very innovative basic income demonstrations done around the world, which are small scale, communities that find some form of fund that they then distribute amongst their citizens. So this is something that we can start doing now. It doesn't have to be we wait for the full whack basic income. We can start working on making sure people are receiving a basic income in the next few years.
Mm-hmm. And Cleo, again, just we've seen a lot of discussion about ideas like this around the world, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. There have been a number of places introduced some form of emergency payments. Spain, for example, Japan, Tuvalu, I believe, just introduced one in the last day or two. What do you think the international community is going to look like around UBI over the next few years?
Yeah, I think it's gonna crop up sooner or later. The next few years, I think we will see, if not more pilots done, than a nation actually implementing a full basic income. I think the time really is now. It's not just in Scotland, it's not just in the UK that this conversation is happening. It's happening all around the world. And I think it's only a matter of time until we see it implemented wholeheartedly. And I think actually once one nation does it, once one country does it, there'll be a bit of a domino effect. I think a little bit of it is the apprehension on a basic income is that no one has fully committed to it before. So I think if someone does that, if a place does that, more places will follow, and it would be fantastic if that was Scotland.
Yeah, and Ronnie, what's your feeling about that? How optimistic are you that we will see something happen soon?
I would agree with Cleo there. It's the domino effect. The world is right now, the basic income world is looking at Scotland to see what we can do. I spoke in Portugal 3 years ago, and the room was full of people from around the world, lots of different countries, and I said to them, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, your country will be implementing a basic income. And if you check the label, it might just say made in Scotland.
Well, that seems like a pretty good note to end on. So I would just like to thank Ronnie Cowan, MP,
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, and Cleo Goodman, thank you both for joining us. And I do apologise to those of you at home who were expecting to see Scott Santens. I think we're all quite disappointed about that. We were all looking forward to hearing from Scott tonight. We will hopefully get a hold of him very soon, and we'll maybe be able to discuss this again. It's an issue that I'm sure we are going to come back to. We have talked about it a lot on this show before, and I'm sure we're not going to stop anytime soon. So do just keep watching. We will let you know as soon as we can make that happen. But thank you at home for joining us as well. It's a real. It's the only reason we do these shows is for you at home. There wouldn't be any point in making them if we didn't have an audience. But we do need your help, though. We need a wee income of our own. So if you're able to help with that, then do please go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month will make a huge difference to what we're able to do here at Broadcasting Scotland. We have all sorts of plans and ideas and things we want to achieve, but we can't do it without a wee bit more money. So if you're able to help with that, then do please help out. If you're not able to help out financially, then please don't feel bad about that. As we've said again tonight, we do understand that a lot of people are really struggling financially, so don't feel bad about that. But what you can do instead is follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot. You can follow us on Facebook, just search Broadcasting Scotland. And then you can be our marketing team. Share these shows around, let people know where we are and what we do. Let them know why you think Broadcasting Scotland is worthy of support. If you can find somebody else to watch and support us, then you've done just as big a job as if you'd contributed yourself. And finally, if you have something else to contribute, some skills or some enthusiasm, or both, then let us know what you'd like to do here at Broadcasting Scotland. There's a lot of work that can be done and should be done. Whether it's journalism, preparing these kind of shows, whether it's being in front of the camera like me or being behind the camera, working in the control room, working behind the cameras, there's lots of work to be done. So do please get in touch with us if you have any interest in getting involved in broadcasting in Scotland, because we are trying to build a broadcaster that serves Scotland, all of Scotland, in the best way possible, and we can only do that if we have more people here doing it. So that is, as I say, all we've got time for tonight. So once again, thank you very much to Ronnie and to Cleo for joining us. And thank you to Scott for at least wanting to be here. I'll be back on Sunday with the full Scottish, where we will again, I'm sure, be talking a wee bit about UBI. And then Gordon will be back on Monday with Scotland at 7. But until then, have a wonderful weekend. Good night.